Recorded history is an interesting concept. We rely on books, stories, movies, and other forms of media to keep us informed of what happened before or when we weren't there to see or experience it. A bridge to the past. Oral history, or storytelling, is one way we keep legends alive from generation to generation. However, these tales are often embellished and geared in favor of the storyteller, or their preferred outcome in the story. It should also be noted that the human memory is known to be inaccurate and definitely not as accurate as we would like to think it is. And so it stands to reason that the time between a historical event and when it is retold can also build a further disconnect between the story and the facts. Perhaps the best way to find out what really happened in the past is to gather as many pieces of data available at the time and to analyze those as a whole. The current version of the 9 Mile Bridge was built in 1992, replacing the old truss bridge that stood before it. Crossing over the Auxvasse Creek in Callaway County, the 150-foot modern concrete girder bridge is supported by large concrete columns. The bridge is part of County Road 156 and just down the hill from the Auxvasse 9 Mile Church and Cemetery. The historic cemetery has lots of old graves, including those of soldiers from the Revolutionary War. The main legend from this location involves the hanging of slaves from the bridge and the drowning of slave children in the creek below. Allegedly, slave owners would dispose of their torture victims here at the bridge. Adult African Americans bound to slavery would be hanged from the bridge, while the children would be drowned in the waters below. It's said that if you spend a moment of silence out at the bridge, you will hear the splashes of the children in the water below. Others report hearing the cries of the children, making this one of the many crybaby bridges throughout the country. According to legend, if you remove your socks and shoes and hang your bare feet over the edge of the bridge, you will feel hands tickling your feet. The stories suggest that these are the ghosts of the hanged and drowned, playing with those brave enough to visit the site of their damnation. One of the more well-known yarns from 9 Mile lays out a ghostly challenge to all visitors. If you drive out into the middle of the bridge and stop your car, turning off all of the lights, it's said that the car will die or have a hard time running until it's pushed or moved off of the bridge. Once it's off of the bridge, it'll start up and run as normal. Is there some kind of energy stopping these vehicles? Or are the ghost children of 9 Mile causing these cars to malfunction? Other visitors claim to see unexplained children's handprints on their vehicles after journeying to the bridge. A few visitors to 9 Mile report seeing the misty figure of a woman walking at a distance or just out of the corner of their eyes. But a quick glimpse and double take, and the mysterious woman is nowhere to be seen. Could this be the mother of the children drowned in the creek? Or perhaps a victim of one of the purported hangings from the bridge? One obscure tale from the depths of the internet tells the story of a priest gone mad. The 9 Mile Church and Cemetery up the hill was allegedly the site of a mass murder, when a priest snapped and killed a group of children at the church. The same vague report claims that the cemetery next to the church is home to witchcraft rituals. The structure of the story seems to suggest that the murderous preacher may have been negatively influenced by witchcraft. Accounts of the hauntings out at the 9 Mile Bridge can be found in Haunted Bridges by Newman. And in other books and internet forums. In regard to the stories of slaves hanged at the 9 Mile Bridge, there are many obvious discrepancies and questions left unanswered. First, no reasoning is ever given for why these unfortunate victims met their demise, just that they were dominated by their slave owners. We did lots of research on the bridge and were unable to find any evidence of hangings or drownings at this particular location. That's not to say it didn't happen here, but if it did, it was never recorded or reported on. With that being said, we did find tons of evidence to suggest that slaves and African Americans were unjustly tortured in Callaway County. The legend of 9 Mile Bridge seems to take most of its inspiration from 2 of these very real accounts. First is the 1895 lynching of African American Emmett Divers. Research suggests that Mr. Divers was wrongfully jailed for a Callaway County murder. Evidence seems to show that Emmet was miles away at the time of the murder, yet he was pegged as an easy culprit upon his return to the area, the color of his skin denying him due process. When Emmet was being transported to St. Louis from a jail in Callaway County, his police escort was met by a mob, who overtook control of Divers and led him to the Cowwood Bridge. Against his will, Emmet was roped and tied, then thrown over the bridge. He was hanged by the mob from the Cowwood Bridge on April 15th of 1895. The mob played judge, jury, and executioner. Unsatisfied with the horrendous group murder at the bridge, Emmet's lifeless body was then taken from the bridge into the town of Fulton, where he was hanged again and shot at by townspeople. Some kind of fucked up trophy to ooh and ah at while they tortured his dead body. Shameful, despicable, disturbing. These are the words that come to mind. Though the 9 Mile Bridge does sit in the Cowwood Township on the Callaway County plat map, it is not the bridge that Emmet was hanged from. We confirmed this with the Callaway County Historical Society. Emmett Divers was hanged from the Cowwood Bridge, which is just outside the settlement of Cowwood, across the interstate, and a few miles from the 9 Mile Bridge. Although both bridges do cross over the same Auxvasse Creek, the modern Cowwood Bridge is very similar to the 9 Mile Bridge. However, 9 Mile is much more rural in its locale, a much better setting for a ghost story. The second source of likely inspiration for the ghost stories surrounding the 9 Mile Bridge is the tale of Celia. Celia was an African American slave made to serve in Callaway County. Teenage Celia was tortured and raped by her slave owner, Robert Newman, for years. Eventually, Celia reached her breaking point and decided to strike back, just as her pig slave owner was attempting to rape her once more. Celia clubbed the man in the head, dropping him with one shot. A secondary blow to the head of her rapist killed him. To cover her tracks, Celia then threw his body into the fireplace and burned his remains. Under intense pressure, Celia's lover, another slave named George, essentially gave Celia up when he indicated to authorities that Robert Newman was last seen headed to Celia's quarters. Upon interrogation and the threat to have her children taken away, Celia broke down and confessed to the murder, explaining that it was a case of self-defense. In trying to prevent Newman from raping her, Celia struck the man dead. Celia was arrested and stood trial before a jury of all white men, some of them slave owners. Celia's lawyer was even a white slave owner himself. As a woman, an African American, and a slave, poor Celia never stood a chance. Celia was hanged at the Callaway County Courthouse gallows in Fulton, Missouri on December 21st, 1855. Her children were taken and sold to other slave owners, never to be heard from again. It seems that the story of Celia and her dispersed children has been appropriated for the legend of the 9 Mile Bridge. In the comments section of another video about the crossing, claims are made that Celia was hanged at this bridge. We know that that's not true, but it wouldn't be the first hanging in Callaway County moved to this bridge for legend's sake. Celia's lost and stolen children seem to play the role of children drowned and killed beneath the 9 Mile Bridge. While her children weren't murdered here, they did suffer a terrible fate, being taken from their mother, sold into servitude, and possibly never knowing the story of their brave and valiant matriarch. We've made many trips to 9 Mile Bridge over the last few years. We've even chronicled some of the expeditions in our video, Haunts of Callaway County, Missouri. For this episode, we made 2 more visits to the crossing for an up-to-date vibe check. We have tested many of the urban legends, including hanging our feet over the edge, stopping our car on the bridge, and listening for the splashes and screams of the hanged and drowned. While we haven't experienced anything paranormal, it is an undoubtedly creepy place to be at, day or night. For both contact sessions we conducted at 9 Mile Bridge, we recorded the SB7 directly into one audio recorder, and then asked the questions aloud and recorded this into a separate device. This allows us to reduce in-the-moment bias, while also giving us the chance to combine and isolate both recordings when reviewing the session afterwards. We conducted our first contact session underneath the 9 Mile Bridge and noticed a major decline in the amount of clearly discernible words or phrases on the SB7. We learned that giant concrete bridges drastically reduce radio signals. This was the first time we had a name pop up on our word randomizer application that seemed like an intelligent response. We had used our KTE application 3 to 4 times before without any contextual response, indicating the odds for intelligent response were very low. We began to realize that over time, the word randomizer will seem to answer intelligently, but this is likely indicative of nothing more than a chance coincidence. We heard sounds in the woods as it got near dark, and then we saw something moving down the hill on the opposite side of the creek. Recent stories of mountain lions and bears in the area had us on edge. Fortunately, it was only a deer traversing the steep hill down to the creek. This reminded us of how ghost stories and current events can put people on edge, making them more likely to misinterpret the mundane as something extraordinary. Hauntings and ghost encounters seem to be a personal experience, unique to the experiencer. So, why leave it to us to force our interpretations of the evidence? We've provided links in the description to our investigation reports, transcripts, and audio files of each contact session. For those interested, you can review the questions we asked, the words that our word generator application produced, and scan for any potential audio anomalies in the review. This is our attempt to make the investigation data interactive, open-sourced, and available for independent review. Please give us feedback if you interact with the data. Let us know what we can do to make the experience better, or how we can more effectively present the research. It seems hard to deny that 9 Mile Bridge is an attempt to lighten the blow of atrocious memories, to weave these tragedies into something of a twisted underground tourist attraction. The people that were tortured and hanged unjustly in Callaway County have names: Emmet and Celia, and many, many others. These very real human beings were treated as animals and killed as such too. It's hauntingly romantic to think that the victims of these tragedies would haunt or curse a place, but the truth is, It's the memory of the torture and unjust punishment that haunts the minds of those who live in and travel through this area. The ghost of guilt is very real.